Bosai, we're going to begin the Mitzvah Hashem, the third Perek Elu Ovrim of Masechet Pesachim. Elu Ovrim can be interpreted in two different ways, Rashi and Tosfos. The Mishnah is going to enumerate seven cases of food by name, 4 fit into one category and the next 3 into another. And Rashi learns that Elu Ovrim, if you take a look at the first Rashi, Elu Ovrim Alam B'Bal Yirah B'Yimotz. We're talking about the requirement of the Torah to get rid of Chometz, and that comes under two different lavim, Bal Yirah B'Yimotz. The Torah says in Parshas Bo, Lo yirah lecha chometz v'lo yirah lecha si'or b'chol gvulecha. And it also says Shivas Yom Si'or lo yimotzei b'vateichem. In addition to that, the Torah commands us to be mavayir, to destroy the chometz under the mitzvah of tashbisu. And Rashi learns that the Chiddush of Mishnah is that everything enumerated in this Mishnah, because it has some element of chometz in it, even though it's not Chometz Gomor, nevertheless it's included in the Isur of Bal Yirah B'Yimotz. The Ran adds that the language of Ovrim means Ovrim in Olam, this Barim in Olam. Get rid of it. Don't keep this in your possession on Pesach. Rabbeinu Tam, on the other hand, says no. We have a list of things that are derived from a ribui. The ribui is in the pasuk Kol Machmetes Lo sochelu. Even in achila, these mixtures and so forth are not explicit in the Torah. They're only derived from a ribui, and the ribui is only as far as achila is concerned. Therefore, Rabbeinu Tam submits there's no Bal Yirah. So, what is the Mishnah talking about? Elu Ovrim Pirish Ochlin Cha Ovrin Me'al Shulchan. Take them off your table. You want to keep them in storage for after Pesach? That's fine. There's no Bal Yirah B'Yimotz. What's on the list? We have Kuta Habavli. This is some sort of a mixture, a dip that was prepared and common in Bavel, and it was made of the whey of milk, W-H-E-Y, with a mixture of salt, a mixture of stale bread, moldy bread, and it was a dip. Sheikh Hamadi, this was the beer that was made in Madai. Most of the beer at that time, at the time of the Mishnah, the Talmud, was made from dates, but this was made from barley. Barley is Chometz. And Chometz Adomi, this is the vinegar that was common in Edom, and they would place into the wine barley to make vinegar. Barley is a fermenting agent. So they would soak barley in water and turn that into the wine, and it would become vinegar. V'zeisoma mitzri, a kind of a drink that in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, they used to make for refuah, for health purposes, and it has in it a mixture of chametz. So those are 4 categories of foodstuffs that are found in particular locations. Now, the Mishnah goes ahead and gives us a list of 3 cases where, again, you violate Bal Yirah B'Yimotz, according to Rashi. And these are different items that are used in different professions, and they also have chametz in them. We have Zomon Shel Tzaboim. Okay, this is the water, the liquids that are used in dyes, and we'll see exactly how they extract it with chametz in it. Amilon Shel Tabachim, and this was a kind of a bread substance that was made of flour, and it was prematurely used before, it became absolutely developed and matured, and it was used by the butchers. Kolon Shel Sofrim, it's a kind of a sticky substance that was used by the scribes to combine smaller pieces of parchment or paper together. And Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he adds another example, in number 8, certain cosmetics that are used by women have an admixture of chametz in them. It's going to be a major debate As to whether Rabbi Eliezer agrees with the Chacham, he's just adding another case, which the Chacham would also agree to, or the Chacham would say Tachshitei Noshim is not to be included in this list. Now the Mishnah presents a klal, a general rule. Zaklal kolchu min dagan. Anything that's made of one of the 5 species of grains, hareza over bepesach, you will violate bal yerobah imatzeh, says Rashi, even though it's not intact, it's not be'en, and even if it's not edible in its state. Harelu bazhar, they're included in a lav. If a person eats a kazayis, and then they will incur a chiyuv malchus. V'ein b'hem mishum kares, but there's no chiyuv kares. Now the Balamar mentions here that tachshitim elu, these cosmetics, are what's called chometz nuksha al yedei tarovis. Meaning, the first 4 categories in our Mishnah are what's called chometz al yedei tarovis. The next 3 are called chometz nuksha, which means hard chometz that it's not edible. And Rabbi Lazar adds a 7th, or shall we say an 8th category, and that is tachshitei noshim, which is tartilary. So it's got 2 negatives. It's not only chametz alidei tarovis, it's also chametz nuksha. That's the Balamor sheet. And the Tanakama holds that there's no iser if you have both nuksha and tarovis. So that's what we have in our Mishnah. Now the Gemara itself will give us an insight on 2 different levels. One, in terms of medicine, what's healthy for the body, what's something that should be left out of your diet because it's detrimental for the body. And in the context of this analysis, we're going to see what the ingredients are of each one of these items. So Tanur Rabbanan, Shlosha Dvarim Ne'amorim B'Kutach HaBavli. There are 3 very unhealthy things about overdoing it with Kutach HaBavli. Now, Kutach HaBavli, as we said before, is like a dip, but some people get carried away with it, and they eat too much of it. And number 1, it's Metamtem Es HaLev. It does not have a very healthy impact on the heart. Some say Metamtem Es HaLev is referring to more intellectual capabilities. And Misame Es Hainayim, it diminishes one's eyesight. Umachish Saguf, and it gives you a general weakness. And now the Gemara will go through the various ingredients that make up Kutach HaBavli and show you how each one is very detrimental to your health. Metamtem Es HaLev mishum nisyove dechalva, that the whey, W-H-E-Y, of milk, which is somehow the extract after they made cheese, that's not good for the heart. Umesame Yaseinaim mishum milcha, there's salt, it's called melech domit, and that is a very, very powerful salt, and sometimes, it could come in contact with through your hands, through your eyes, very dangerous for the eyes. Umachis saguf mishum kumanisa diuma. This is spoiled bread. It's called pas me'upeshes. And that's not something that is healthy for the body. It generates a certain weakness to the body and is a mainstay, one of the main ingredients that go into Kutach HaBavli. But now we know why Kutach HaBavli is Chometz, because it's made from a fully developed piece of Chometz after it got spoiled, and it was added to this mixture to make Kutach HaBavli. Okay, now we go on to other health issues with regard to one's diet. Not all of this is relevant to our study here, the 3rd Perek of Pesachim, but Tanur Rabbanan, Shlosha Dvarim Marbim HaZevel, Kofen Es HaKoma, V'notlin Echad Michamesh Me'os Mima'or Einov Shel Od. There are 3 foodstuffs that have to be avoided because, number 1, they cause an increase in excrement, and number 2, they cause the posture of a person to be bent over, and thirdly, they diminish the eyesight by 1/500. Eluhain, these are the three. Pas Ibar. This is bread that's made from unrefined flour, flour that's full of who knows what, certain coarse, maybe bran and other things. Shecher Chadash, new fresh beer, very powerful. Yerek Chai, Rashi says, leeks, batzel, chazeres, uh, onions, and raw onions could be very unhealthy. And if a person, Rashi adds here that if he eats it on a regular basis and he overdoes it, no, in general, raw vegetables are not unhealthy. They're healthy, but everything within reason. Tana Rabbanu learned to the Brisa Shlosha Dvarim. These are the opposite three that are antidotes that will add your health if you ate the other three that were unhealthy. Is mamatim es hazevel, zokfin es hakoma, mirin es einayim elohim, pasnikia, basar shamein, v'yayin yosha. And now the Gemara is going to go through these three cases. What are they? Pasnikia. The Gemara says the pasnikia, if you turn here to Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis, dismida. Smida is the Aramaic equivalent of solus. Solus is refined flour. Basar shamein. What is basar shamein? What kind of meat are we advocating that's good for the health? Ditzfirta de lo iftach. He translates it as an Iza. Iza is a female AIDS, a female goat. Shalom niftach rachma. In other words, it did not give birth. And Yayin Yoshan is Atik Atike. Rashi says, if you take a look on the second line from the top, Yoshan Chol Sholochan. It's 3 years old. Vintage wine that's healthy for the body, healthy for the eyes, and for the the gastro system in terms of bowel movement, so forth. That's Yayin Yoshan. It's 3 years old. But the Gemara warns us that just because we've given a big plus to these three items that are healthy, be careful. Why? Because kol mili b'mali lahai, kosher lahai, the kosher lahai, mali lahai. Anything that's healthy for one part of the body, for one organ of the body, can be damaging and detrimental to your health for another part of the body. So, for example, you could have something that's very healthy for the heart, but nevertheless, it has a negative impact on your eyesight. Udekoshalahai, and the other way around. Bar, however, here are the 4 cases of something that's win-win, that's only positive. Zangebila retiva, that means fresh or moist zangebil. Zangebil is what's called ginger in English. Then you have pilpile arichta, those longer pilpels, peppers. Then you have pasnikia, which is a flour that's made after being refined and cleansed of all those admixtures of pebbles and bran and whatever have you. Basar shamein, which is a reference to the meat made or from a shechted goat, a female goat that never gave birth, and yain yoshan, and old wine. All of the above are maili lekule gufe. They are absolutely healthy for the entire body. So there's nothing, no downside in them. So you had pasnikia, and you have yain yoshan, and you have basar shamein. Those are on the list. Now the Mishnah mentions shecher amodai, which we said was the beer that was made in a place called Modai. If you learn Megillah Esther, you'll learn about Modai, Parsu Modai. And the Gemara says the Ramu Be Meisiari, because when they make the beer in Modai, they add what's called barley water. In other words, they soak barley in water and they add, I guess, the hops, and then they make beer out of it. So it's made out of barley, that's pretty much the beer that we're familiar with today. Back in the Gemara's time, they used to make beer from dates, and that's not chometz. Here we're talking about beer that's made from barley, which is chometz gamur, and therefore it is also on Pesach. Back at the time of the Talmud, it was very rare. You had to go to Madai to buy that quality chometz beer. Fine. And he quotes here Rishonim amongst them Tosfos, who are of the opinion that if you put Siorin into Mayim, and even if you add Meiperos, then it's not called Taroves Chometz, but rather Chometz Nuksha. And that's a little bit difficult because our Mishnah here in the first four categories is listing Chometz Gomer al Yidei Taroves. So we have to figure out, which kinds of beer and when is it called Taroves Chometz, when is it called Chometz Nuksha. Then we have Chometz HaAdomi. All right, this is Chometz vinegar that comes from Edom. The Sharubei Siori. And as we said before, in the case of Sheikh Ramadai, here too, in Chometz HaAdomi, they add into the Chometz barley, and that is a fermenting agent, and therefore it's Chometz. Now the Gemara goes to a kind of a Gadata, an interlude, about the difference between wine before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed and afterwards. Omer Rav Nachman, Betchilo, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Shoymeviim, Yain L'Nesachim, they brought wine from Eretz Yehuda, interesting, the south, not from the north, from the Galil. And Lo Haya Yenom Shel Yehuda Machmitz, the quality of the wine in Yehuda was so superior that they would dedicate it for the mitzvah of Nesachim, and perhaps there was some sort of great miracle that preserved the wine because it was designated for the Nesachim. Ad shenosnim l'sochan siori. He says that the wine itself was of such superior quality that it would never become chometz, or I should say chometz. It would never sour and become vinegar. We have something called wine vinegar, but this wine was of such a superior quality, it would never become vinegar on its own unless you added a fermenting agent, which in this case is barley, into the wine. Vayukorin also chometz stam. At that time, when they called it chometz, they were referring to barley that made, as a fermenting agent, made the wine turn into vinegar. The achshav, now after the destruction of the Mikdash, ein yenom shel adomim machmitz ad shenosim l'sochen siorim v'karnos al chometz adom. Now that the Mikdash is gone, so instead of Yehuda, the Jewish people, being on a superior position, now the Edomites, the descendants of Esav, they now take over the superior position. So whatever we said about describing the quality of wine in Yehuda when the Mikdash stood, now we're going to say the same thing, the beautiful quality, superior quality of the wine in Edom, because Edom is now taken over. And as a result, what is Chometz Adomi? It's only wine to which they added barley, and that's what gave it the fermenting agent. It made it into vinegar, but in and of itself, the wine from Edom, maybe it's Italian wine, I don't know, would not become chometz. And this is l'kayim hashenever. This is a manifestation of what the Navi says in Yechezkel. I'll read to you the whole pasuk. He says, "Asher amrat sar al Yerushalayim he'ach nishbara dalsos ha'amim naseva elai imola ha'charav." The last words, imole ha'charav, means esmale animi churbana. And what does that mean? Im maleazu charevazu, im maleazu charevazu. When one of these two nations is on the high, is Malaya, it's full. The other one is Chareva, is desolate, and the other way around. So Yehuda and Edom are just antithetical, polar extremes, one from the other. Of Nachbar Yitzchak has a different source to derive the same conclusion. When Rivka is pregnant with twins, she goes to ask for Nevuah, and she finds out that she's carrying twins. And La'om Mila'om Yematz, which means that when the father of Edom, which is Esau, is Yematz, is powerful, then Yaakov is weak. Just the opposite. If Yaakov is strong and Esau is weak, it's the reverse relationship. And that's what reflects itself in the quality of the wine. So when the Jews are on top, that was during the Beis Hamikdash period, the wine was excellent. And it would never turn into vinegar. But unfortunately, after the Mikdash, just the opposite. It's the wine of Edom that was of high quality and would never turn into vinegar, unless you added barley, as we said before. Anya, we learned in the Bryce Summer of Yehuda, Be Eretz Yehuda Brishona, during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Halokeach Chometz Me'ama Oretz Eino Tzarch Li'aser. If you purchased vinegar, you don't have to do maser. Why? Because they would never add vinegar to the quality wine that they had. Or I shouldn't say that, they didn't add barley into the quality wine to make vinegar out of it. Why waste such a high quality wine that could be designated for the Mikdash for the Nesachim? So all you're left with is wine that's made from the dregs, from the sediments of grapes, which have perhaps a taste, or maybe they have a smell of wine. It has the color of wine, but it's not wine, and therefore it doesn't require Trumas and Meisters. The Torah says that you have to be mafresh maser from products of grapes. But now, after the destruction of the Mikdash, how do they make vinegar? Today they make vinegar from wine. And if you buy vinegar, you're basically buying wine. What is that? What do I mean? That they would take wine and they would add this barley substance or whatever that would ferment the wine. But whatever you ended up with, which is called temed, then that temed was made of wine itself. And therefore it needs hafresh. We don't rely on the Amoritz. He's not trustworthy, even if he's an Orthodox Jew, but he's not meticulous about being mafresh masa. It's too much of an expense for him, or maybe it's too complicated to know how to do it. So Gemara says, "V'savar Rabbi Yehuda temed lav isurehu," meaning that during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we recorded in the Bryce in the name of Rabbi Yehuda that temed does not require afrashas masa, because again, as we said before, all it has is the color and the taste of the wine, but it doesn't have the actual pulp of the wine, of the grapes. So the Gemara says, "V'sava Rabbi Yehuda temed lav aritzurehu." Is it really true that according to Rabbi Yehuda, temed doesn't require maser? For Hatan, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Masos in the 5th Perek of Pesachim. If a person adds water, and soaks the chartzanim of the grapes or the sediments of wine, then v'nosa mayim b'mida. If now we're going to go through the Tanakhama and then Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakhama is going to say that if you know exactly the volume of water that you put in to soak, and Motza Kadei Midasa, you find the exact amount of water, and the volume of the water did not go up at all, it's part you don't have to be mafresh maser, because there's no yayin here, no material, substance of grapes added to the volume of the water. It's the same water. But yet Rabbi Yehuda's machayet. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to be mafresh maser from temed, even though you checked out the volume and it's exactly identical, meaning the taste of the wine and the color of the wine makes it into wine, and you're chayav in Trumas and Meisers. So how do we reconcile these two brises that apparently contradict one another? The Gemara answers, Hachi Kamar, when Rabbi Yehuda said that when the Beis Hamikdash stood and you bought vinegar from an Amoritz, you were potter from Meiser because it only comes from Temed. That's not because Temed is potter from a Maser, but Hachi Kamar lo nechshedu Amoritz al Temed. In other words, the Temed is so inexpensive that the Amoritz would not play games with Temed. It wasn't worth it to start, being suspect of not fulfilling the mitzvah of Maser. He would be mafresh the Maser, and that was fine because he didn't take a financial loss from it. By saying a second possible reconciliation, these two brises of Rabbi Yehuda, nechshedu, we do suspect, even in the case of Temed, that the Amoritz did not take off Maser. Lokasha. Ha bidir vaka v'ha bidir purtzene. When the Mishnah quoting Rabbi Yehuda says Yechayev in Trumas of Meisers from Temed, that's the case of Temed that was made from the substance of wine. There were sediments of wine that had real grapes in it. And therefore, there's a tarovas here of yayin that is bolua. It actually absorbs the shmarim, the sediments of the wine. But the brisa that quotes from you that you parted from Trumas of Meisus and Temed, that's a case of Temed that's made from chartzanim. We'll go over this again one more time. Ha b'der Ravka, ha b'der Purtzene. When Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that Yechayev in Hafrashas Truma and Maser from Temed, that's Temed that's made from lees, and it contains actual wine. He has in a footnote here that Temed was made by adding water to the lees that collected the bottom of the wine barrel. I guess we'd call it shmarim in Hebrew, lees in English, and it actually contains droplets of wine that were in the lees, and therefore it needs maser. But Rabbi Yehuda in the Brisa, who says that Temed is not chayiv in maser, that's a reference to Temed that's made from grape seeds, and they don't contain any actual grape. It's all wine that's really just water soaked and absorbed the flavor of the grape seed. It's just simply flavored water, and that's what you have over here is